Okay, great. So, biographical approach to learning a theory. Does anybody know anything about that? What are the approaches to learning the theory, basically? Any theory framework? How do we learn a theory? I mean, so far you've taken the theory class. You must have, in the undergrad journey, academic journey, you must have learned a bunch of theories, right? And theories are in every field. Theories help us to understand, throw light on what's going on. So you can learn a theory by what?
What are you looking
Anybody?
for? That we can read about it or we can be told about it? Is that more along the lines of what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, when you want to learn a particular theory, you just learn about the theory, the framework. There's this assumption which guides the theory, and then there is axioms that help us explain. For example, if you take the relational dialectics theory, which is very famous in communication discipline. Anybody knows about relational dialectics theory? RD?
A little bit, not a lot. We kind of touched on it. It's been a while though.
Or any other theory, like maybe a mass comm theory that you must have, Sarah, you must have come across. There's theories in every discipline, right? So you just learn the theory. I mean, what I'm trying to ask you is, like, you go through, there is a framework, there is assumptions, and this is how the observation was done, and they found a pattern, and then you have an explanation of how things work. Like how, for example, interpersonal relationships, they work under three dialectics: the openness, closeness, right? What else? Novelty, predictability. Haley, do you remember? Do you recall anything? No. Well, in the undergrad curriculum, we lot of students use the relational dialectics framework, which helps explain relationships. How we get into relationships, what happens in the relationship, what are the two dialectics. So we just go in and look at the theory. The two theorists who propounded that theory, we just Google them, and then the theory comes up. So we can learn a theory by just looking at the theory, and then understand the theory. But then also, more than likely, the theory is proposed by somebody, some academician, some theorist, basically, and we don't pay much attention to the guy who, or the lady who came up with the theory. We just know that this is a theoretical framework, and then here you go. But when you talk about biographical approach to learning theory, we essentially do learn about the theory, but we also learn about the background of the theory, the guy who actually wrote the theory, what that person's journey was, and how did the theorist influence the theory. So if you look at diffusion of innovations theory, we're going to take the biographical approach. So we're going to learn the life of F. Rogers. And then through his life, we can learn the theory. That makes sense? To understand his biography. And that's called the biographical approach to understanding a theory. Many a times, the theorist is not considered to be that important. The theory is considered to be important. what the person has brought to the table is considered to be important. But sometimes it gets boring, if you're just learning the theory and there are so many theories that there is a disconnect between how that theory came up, how the person kind of under what circumstances the theory was evolved. That's kind of not stressed a lot. But in our case, we're going to understand the life of this gentleman, this most cited scholar, and Haley is going to tell a little bit more about her readings that people have written. So this is a person who spent about 45 years in academia and written a lot of books. And there's a process. There is a nice story behind how he came up with this framework to understand how innovation spread in society. So biographical approach helps us to personify, to really make it simple in what is going on with the theory, because it's a storytelling approach. We break it down and we learn about the fundamentals of the context that happened during which this theory came about. Every theory, even though, theory is supposed to be a priori, means it's supposed to be based on facts, right? But as you know, in social sciences, theory is also based on context, and it's influenced by people, it's influenced by events, and we know about this theory because of some context. A theory is not completely truth with capital T. That makes sense? Theories change, theories evolve. It's not just that, here you have a theory, that's the last word on how things work, right? So theories, as much as we say it is social scientific theory, it is also subject to change. Even hard sciences, if you go to hard sciences, and if you take, for example, Newton's laws of motion. Now, there's a whole truth in it, and a lot of things work on that laws, right? Even in hard sciences, like the first law of Newton's theory of motion is every force has an equal reaction. And then I don't know the mathematics part of it. I barely passed science, So I know the three laws and I know all that stuff, but there's a lot of mathematics involved in it. And at the end of the day, people will say, this is how it works. And you cannot, if you, every force has equal reaction is actually evident in real life. And it cannot be changed. You might say it cannot be changed. But even that theory is subject to change. Likewise, social scientific theories are really, really just frameworks. They are not completely information that is foolproof. It's basically a pattern that has come out over a period of time. We have observed certain things, we gathered data, we observed certain things. For example, how an innovation is created and how it is diffused throughout the society. There is a pattern to it. And F. Rogers kind of uncovered that pattern during his course of study, and then he came up with his theory, right? Likewise, Newton did the same thing, and all the biology theories and history, there might be theories, geography, weather science, you name it. Management, Steve, I think you must have heard a lot of stories and a lot of theories in management. In business school.
Wait a minute, those people in the shiny building on the end of campus, they're only about fact and bottom line. They're not about storytelling. They don't really want to hear how you got there. They just want to know what it is.
Exactly. So business and science, I think they are not interested in how that theory came about. They're like, okay, this is how it works. How do you make money in business? What is the best way to make money? I guess they are more interested in accounting, in finance, and other areas. So biographical approach, I don't think you might have heard a whole lot. This class is kind of unique because why I'm taking this biographical approach is the story of F. Rogers is interesting, and it helps us to learn how the theory is built. But also, I have a connection to the theorist. So your instructor also is personally, biographically connected to the theorist. So he was, as I was telling you, he was my advisor. And I was his last advisee, PhD advisee. I mean, he minted a lot of PhDs all around the world. Haley can give you some idea on it, that, he's guided a lot of students. He has written over 40 books. This is the most popular book among that. And he has done a lot of work. And because of his research, he is still now, after almost 15, 16 years of his death, he's still the most cited scholar in social sciences across the disciplines. His work is found useful in many, many areas, not only in communication. He's a communication scholar. He came from sociology, but changed to communication. But that gives you an extent of how big researcher he was, how big a writer he was, how big a mentor he was, how big, how innovative he was in many ways. So different aspects of his life can throw light on the theory. So that's what we're going to do, the biographical approach. So actually, so I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, can you see it? So since we're doing the biographical approach, we're going to learn a little bit about his life. So how did this guy come up with this theory? So obviously a lot part of the theory is basically rooted in how agricultural innovations have spread throughout the history of last 100 years. He was born on a farm, but naturally he was going through all the work that is there. He always saw things around him change. We're talking about 1930s and 40s when agricultural innovations were taking a very, very big aspect. Things, food production was going up. There was a lot of innovations in terms of hybrid seed, new forms of seed were invented. Fertilizers, new different kind of fertilizers were invented. And then different agricultural machinery is invented. So all of those inventions were geared towards agricultural modernization and increase of production. So he was born in Iowa, and he worked on the farm for the first 20 years of his life. And obviously, when you grow up on the farm, you have not much going on. It's a hard life. You wake up 4 a.m. That's what he used to tell me, because we used to have long conversations in his office in New Mexico, and he used to he was a really great storyteller. So he used to say I used to wake up really early in the morning. You can imagine the winters in Iowa, very cold winters, but he still used to get up and he has to work. Everybody has to contribute to the farm. It is a lot of manual work. So he used to wake up 5 in the morning, milk the cows, then make sure the um, uh, stuff on the farm is taken care of. Whatever it is, he has to go out there, work and help his parents throughout the morning till afternoon, then come back for lunch, and then go back again. And in between, he used to go to school for a couple hours because there was a small school next to his farm. And his dad was a farmer. They had a big, I don't know, 200 acres of land. So there's lots of things to be done on a day-to-day basis. But he saw that I mean, very naturally, you can see that honesty, hard work, all of that things was his core values. And he grew up appreciating all of that. I myself have not. My dad was a farmer, but he changed his profession and he went into the Air Force. So we were moving a lot. So I usually used to he used to take us, my dad used to take us to, for the 2 months summer vacation, we used to always go to our village back home in my village. And we used to spend a lot of time on the farm because we had a small piece of land and he was very attached to it. But anyone, if you have any association with being raised on a farm? Most of you are from urban settings.
No, in my particular side, I did that for a couple of summers, but I tried to stay away from it.
It is grueling, right? Why did you stay away from it, Steve?
I'm not a farmer, nor am I a country boy. I've learned that. I had a farm before I came back into town out in Perry County. And it's like, I don't do this stuff. Put me back on the beach where I belong.
Yeah, it is hard work. Yeah. What about Sarah? You have any connection with farm? Have you seen the life?
My grandfather was a rancher. So yeah, I grew up around like a pretty big farm, not on a farm, but I'm aware of the ins and outs of farm life.
It's hard work, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I never really had to do any of it, but my dad talks about it a lot still, so I would say so.
Right. And Haley, what about you?
Nothing. I have no ties to a farm.
Do you have at least a backyard garden or something?
My grandparents did, but we did not growing up.
Okay. Well, okay. So then I guess you can understand, his fundamental idea was growing up on a farm. I mean, and the only way to kind of rise up in life is to understand what is going on in the world. You have a very straightforward notion of how things work. You got to grow things, you got to take care of animals, you got to sell them, you got to really day-to-day task is to just survival, I guess. So these are the values that he was grown up, and all of that shaped his interest later on in life. So obviously, because first 20 years of his life he spent on a farm, he was a storyteller, he was a great networker, because you don't live on a farm and then expect everything to be fulfilled independently, because some things happen, the weather becomes crazy, you need some help, and then you're in the middle of nowhere, and you have to depend on your neighbors to help you out if something goes wrong. If you're not well and sowing has to be done, some aspect, it doesn't wait. You got to help your neighbor. The neighbor helps you when you are in trouble. So all of these aspects kind of shaped who Ev was. right from the beginning. He was listening always to others, so good listener, good storyteller. He has to tell everything. Then he later on in his life he understood the value of networking, and to the end of his life, I mean, he was a great networker. He has this ability, uncanny ability to connect people from different cultures, from different areas of life, from different expertise. So all of these were his qualities. I think he was a constant farmer even to the end, because in New Mexico, when I was going to school, he had a big garden in his house up in the Sandia Mountains. He had a beautiful house up in the Sandia Mountains. And then he used to, because he was grown up on a farm, I think he always liked gardening. So one day I went to school, and in my mailbox, I found a Kroger bag, a Smith's bag. Actually, there's no Kroger. There used to be no Kroger in Albuquerque that time. So there was a grocery store called Smith's Groceries, and so I saw a bag full of stuff in my mailbox, and I didn't know what it was, and so I pulled the bag out, and it was from El, and it had all kinds of vegetables in it: tomatoes, beans, some kind of melons, okra, and this and that. And he used to do that. He used to just grow all these vegetables, and he used to just distribute it to students, to other faculty members, to anybody who. He just had the same kind of. He continued the tradition that he was growing up with. So he was a constant gardener, and I think that influenced his work later on in life, and even in academics. He knew that first-hand knowledge is better, because and he knew the power of observing things. To come up with a pattern, you have to observe closely what's going on. When you observe closely what's going on, then you can find a pattern. So the data, importance of data, first-hand data, and then later on, how do you make sense of the data? How do you analyze the data to come up with some results, come up with some analysis? Those kind of things that I guess he learned on the farm. He was, yes, Steve?
I want to go back on that he was an interculturalist. I didn't realize it. I had to go look it up to make sure I knew what it even meant. I didn't realize that was a political movement or a political ideology.
Being an interculturalist?
Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, I mean, he worked across continents. He worked in Africa, he worked in Latin America. His first research was done in Latin American countries to understand the effect of these television soap novellas, these television things that were broadcast in Latin America, and then how through that change was happening. Education, entertainment, edutainment is something that he was very much involved in Latin America. So he did a lot of work in Latin America first, then in Africa, and then in India. And to do that kind of work, he had to understand people from different cultures. And so that's why we call him an interculturalist. He had a big following of international students, because wherever he went, he did all this research with different scholars and networked with them, and then understood what was going on in Indonesia. If you read the book, there's a bunch of stories in this book about his experiments everywhere. So there's a famous story in Indonesia how he understood the cultivation of rice, indigenous rice there. So he went to Bali, I think, and then he studied there. In Mexico, he studied in Latin America. He studied all these soap operas that were telecast on the television and the effect of soap operas. So obviously he had a knack of connecting with people, especially people from different cultures. So that's why he's interculturalist. It's a trait. I think, Steve, I have observed you get along with people from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of cultures too.
Mhm.
So it's
I've just never seen it as a political movement. That was my only comment.
it is actually after the world started getting integrated, it became a movement, being an interculturalist. And now you see things are going in the opposite direction. People are not really doing that thing, right? So anyway, so L went to school. He quickly found he graduated high school, the small school. He went and then he went to college, Iowa State University in Des Moines, I think. He went there and he took sociology, and so he came across these people, socialists, social scholars, who are basically Comte, George Simmel, Robert Park, Kurt Lewin, and Robert Merton. These are the big guys in sociology, and his thought process, his theory, is influenced by these guys' work. So George Simmel, for example, he is a German sociologist, and he talked a lot about networks, how networks influence communication of ideas, how networks influence ideologies, how networks influence all kinds of things. So he was influenced by Simmel. You can see in his work Kurt Lewin, who actually talked about this thing that there's nothing as practical as a theory. He's the guy who, Kurt Lewin, came up with this opposite notion that theory is just not theory, it is actually very practical. Theories need to be very practical, not just theories out in vacuum. So he was obviously influenced by the 1930s and 1940s scholar. When he went to school, he read about these guys. And you can see traces of their work in his Diffusion of Innovations work. So he used to tell us all the time, he said, if you work hard, I guess that generation believed in this. If you have the enthusiasm and if you work hard, that leads to a bright idea and that leads to success. That was his mantra. That was his formula for success. So what is the contribution of Ev? I think he's, as I was telling you, he's a paradigm builder. He's called as a paradigm builder because he was able to explain lot of processes, small processes, micro level processes, and then connect all these knowledge together and then find a big framework, which is how a paradigm is built. That make sense? So he was able to pick up on a lot of things that are going around in his surroundings. For example, on his farm, his dad was not very open to new ideas. When you're a farmer and then you're doing the same thing again and again, and then you get used to the routine, and then you don't want to do anything different, right? Most of farmers are just, something is working well and they keep doing the same thing again and again. But he observed that the guy in the next door, his neighbor, the next farm from his father's farm, they were able to increase the production quickly because that owner of the farm maybe had was open to idea to experiment something new. Now, that brings us to this whole question of openness, because it might be fascinating, a new idea might be fascinating, but also it is risky. If it doesn't work, then you're going to get into big trouble, isn't it? If the technique that you're using on your farm to raise the animals or raise the on your ranch or whatever is working well, and then you introduce a new idea, and then the whole thing goes, it doesn't work, it fails. Then what are you going to do? You're left with nothing. So there's a risk involved in new ideas, and so he saw that firsthand, the ups and downs of embracing a new idea. If you embrace, then what happens? If you don't embrace, then what happens? And he got really interested in this kind of stuff. So that's why the theory is so unique. So he was able to gather the small pieces of information and make sense and make it into a big paradigm. Okay. He was genuinely interested in what is going around on his farm, and then later on in his academic life, he treated every individual with respect. I think unique quality of being a researcher and being a human scholar, and he really believed in what you love to do will definitely result in some kind of reward that will eventually come. If you love what you do, then obviously there'll be results. So let me stop here and then ask for any questions. Do you like the biographical approach? Is it boring to understand? Is it different than the approach that you have taken to understanding theory?
I've got a question. I don't know if it follows any of that concept at all, but I'm going to ask anyway. Could you almost look at this book as a dissertation? When we're looking at the diffusion of innovations and it's his biography, I mean, it's about the same length as a dissertation, and the number of sightings that he's got in here is crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's his part of his dissertation. And this is in the 5th edition. So there was the first edition, 1962. Then we have 1972, second edition. Every 10 years, there's an edition coming out, and this last one was 2004. So are you asking, Steve, that question to me or to the other two classmates?
No, I was really asking you if this could be viewed as if somebody, it's his dissertation, if he so desired. Because it's about 500 pages, and so it's cited, Lord knows it's been peer-reviewed enough.
Yeah, it is his dissertation, his PhD dissertation, refined even more and more. You're right. Completely right. He kept refining that theory till the last minute, because the theory kept evolving according to new context and new situation. It was not how it was in the 1962 when it first came out of his dissertation. So he did his dissertation on diffusion of innovations, and he, mostly when you have a dissertation that big, then you can actually come up with a book too. So he came out with this first edition, and then the theory kept getting used in real life in different fields, and so it needed updating all the time. So in 1972, it was different theory. He kept adding some components to it. 1982, 1992, and then 2004. So right, yeah, I mean, it was a continuous dissertation, so to speak. He was just a fabulous researcher that he kept going. So, but is it helpful for you? I just want to have some feedback from you guys. to know the life of some person, and that helps to know the history, know the theory actually. Sarah is saying
Let
yes.
somebody else answer that one.
I think it can be helpful in some situations. If like I think it's always going to be helpful to understand what point of view someone is coming from. But I think it is probably definitely helpful for bigger theories, like a lot of the ones that we look at that are really complex. I think that can add just like an extra layer that can just help us be more aware of what we're actually learning about.
Right. I mean, in this department itself, you're getting exposed to the the cultural organization theory, which Dr. is teaching, crisis communication theory. In this department, you're exposed to different frameworks, right? What else? Conflict. Some of the conflict mediation theories that Dr. Bailey is teaching. Kristen McIntyre is teaching what? Have you taken that class? The summer class that she teaches? What is the theory that she talks about?
Wait,
It's evil. That one's
talking
evil.
about Dr.
Kristen
McIntyre?
Yeah.
Yeah, what Lord. Yeah, a lot.
What theory is that?
Experiential learning theory.
Exactly. So there's an experiential learning theory, which has the Kolb model and everything. Then we have the crisis communication theory. Then Dr. Bailey Oliver teaches conflict theories. Then Julian Mirevas, he teaches positive communication theory. So you got theories and theories and theories, but I don't think they stress a whole lot about who the theorist is. It's all about the theory. So that's why I'm trying to kind of make a distinction here about what is learning theory in terms of biographical approaches. That makes sense? Nobody has gone as much into detail about the life of the theorist as this class kind of tends to do, which has its own advantages and helps better to actually lay down the context of what's going on. So anyway, so I'm going to move on. So there is a whole lot of things that are going on. Diffusion is a special type of communication. As you can see, here the messages. The communication is all about new ideas. How does a new idea spread through a system, social system? And back then, when he was growing up, Ave Rogers, things were very different. And now we have Snapchat and ChatGPT and internet and all kinds of social media where you can put your new idea on a social platform, and then it might be much easier to diffuse that. Do you think? A new idea, a new thing that you have lots of channels in today's world as opposed to 60, 70 years back to spread an idea.
I miss having 3 television stations.
Yeah, back then it was television stations. Sometime back, but now even more powerful ways to disseminate your message is this social media, isn't it? So things have changed a lot, but the fundamentals are the same because people are people are always looking for new ideas. Even now, people are hungry for new ideas. But the challenge is, since new ideas involve a lot of uncertainty, and it leads to change. When an idea spreads into a system, it automatically leads to a change. So this is all about diffusion. Diffusion is all about new messages containing new ideas, and then those new ideas always have uncertainty embedded into it. And then when they diffuse to a system, it usually results in spontaneous change, or even sometimes when you do a diffusion campaign, you can plan a campaign and you can plan a change, a specific change you want to bring about in society. So this is where it gets a little different. Most of times in the history of human life, new ideas have spread on their own. There was not much done to, in terms of efforts taken to diffuse this idea in a planned way. Things just happened, somebody started doing some new stuff, and then it worked, and people started following that guy, and they said, oh, okay, sure, it's good, let's do it. And it was picked up by a couple people, and then those couple people told about the idea to other couple people, and then that's how slowly things changed. It brought about social change. But nowadays, it's changed because now you want to bring about social change, and you plan a whole diffusion campaign, a completely diffused strategy, a new strategy, because you know how diffusion works now, thanks to Ev Rogers. So this is what we're going to learn, I guess. There are different varieties of communication diffusions, and there are different variables that are there. Obviously, any diffusion involves innovation. There has to be channels of communication, and diffusion is always studied over a period of time because it takes time for things to change, ideas to diffuse, and then finally, diffusion doesn't happen without a social system. Diffusion happens in a social system. So these are the 4 different variables that are there in diffusion. All these were proposed by Ev Rogers. Yes, Steve?
Are we talking about being a disruptor?
Yes.
Whenever we're talking about, okay.
That's
I just haven't heard the term used yet in the class, and I'm seeing where we have adopter categories, but nothing about, a leader of the pack, so to speak.
Well, diffusion can be used to disrupt the system too, which is what I think the second book that we're using, Mohan Datta book, the first book is this one. And the second book that we're using is more concerned about diffusion being a disruptor of the society. So it's social change, but change that really shakes up the whole system. After coming back from Labor Day weekend, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about how it can be a disruptor. It can really upset the whole system. So let's kind of do this short activity, to get a sense of how complex diffusion is. So even if the idea is good, it takes time to diffuse. So, for example, in your own life, when did you first started using internet? I mean, which year? Steve, I think you might be able to tell us when did you actually started using internet in a way that when did you hear about it, and when did you start using internet?
I'm guessing the first time that I have involved in anything that was networked to begin with, that led shortly thereafter the internet use. That had to have been in the late 80s.
Okay, you
Somewhere
heard
there.
about it in 1980s. That was a long time back.
Yeah, in the late 80s. I graduated high school in 79. But we didn't have computers at that time.
So then when did you actually start using it? Which year? High school, you learned about it 89, 90, maybe. And then
I guess I was close to it was the late 80s, 88, 89, before I actually started using it. And once I started using it, it adopted for business rather quickly. So it was, once you got a taste of it, you were in it. Kind of like where Chat GPT is today. Once you get a taste of it, I got to go back for more.
right. Yeah, but it took a while for you to actually use it. From just hearing it to using it, that took a while.
Well,
Isn't
I
it?
mean,
That's what I'm hearing.
there were so many things that were still, where was our security? This is my accounting information. I was using QuickBooks. Where is this stuff actually going to? What's a cloud? I mean,
Right.
all kind of things you just didn't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. So if you just recall, let's say internet is an innovation. It's a new idea that came out in technology. I think most of the innovations are coming out of technology. So I heard about the internet like you, I think a couple of years later, Steve, in the 1990s. But the real thing when I started really using internet was to do emails, which was 1995, 1996, when actually I started working as a journalist with Times of India. And they gave me an email address. Actually, they told us to have an email address because hotmail.com had just come out. And they said, every journalist should have a Hotmail account. And on every office computer, we had internet. This was back in India, 1996 or 97, I got my first email address, avinash4@hotmail.com. I just randomly chose a name, and then they said you should have a name, but also have a numerical in addition to it. I no longer use hotmail.com. I mean, not many people use Hotmail nowadays. But that was from hearing internet in 1992 to actually using it took me about 5-6 years. So it gives you an idea, right? What about the other two classmates here? When did you hear about internet and when did you actually start using it?
I grew up with the internet. So like I remember having a computer room from like the time I was, I don't know, like a toddler. And I
Wow.
think I started using it for real probably when I was in like first or second grade. We had netbooks in our class and like iPads by the time we were in fifth grade. So I just always
You're born with internet.
I was actually like the whole like Y2K thing. I was born in January of 99, so yes.
You already were there when everything was just rolling along. Well, that is interesting. So there was no lag for you for this, at least for this innovation. There might be for other innovations. What about you, Haley?
I'm kind of the same, although I do remember internet evolving for me. I remember first off just playing like little, like the Toad Crosses the Road games on like the computer in the room, and that was all I used the internet for. Back when I was like a child, and then I remember it slowly evolving into something that I was like, oh, I can access something on this, like I can actually access information on this.
So it did take a little while for you.
It did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe I should. Maybe internet is not not a good innovation, I should say, cell phone. When did you first hear about cell phone, and when they actually start using cell phone? That might, for the people who are not Steve in my generation, I think people who are born now, internet was kind of a given to them. I think that question doesn't make any sense. But any other innovation will actually. So what I'm trying to get at here is that you have a new idea, and if you're born into the new idea, then I think it's a different thing. But if you just hear about the new idea and then you start using the new idea, it takes a while between those two things, because the idea is still germinating and spreading and evolving and coming to the system. It's passing through the social system, and it takes a while. Yes, Steve?
I don't know. I see so much of that has to do with somebody's thoughts on risk. I mean, and that's where you come out with the different adopter roles, where you have those that are the influencers right off the bat to those on the back end that they don't want to change for anything. So so much of it has to do with risk, because it's like the internet. I honestly don't remember much about that one in this particular sense that you gave it, but I do remember GPS and the different other navigational aids that we had. I was captain on tugs and officer on ships. So, as soon as any new toy came out, you just grabbed it and started playing with it because it was a new innovation.
Right. But sometimes you will not, even if you want to grab it, sometimes it's beyond your reach. It's not cost effective. Still has issues. There is that, Now,
wait a minute. I went to sea with an old captain that the first calculator he ever saw came on a ship. He took it from the guy and locked himself up for 3 days to prove that calculator was wrong.
That's hilarious.
And that's just what you had at that time. That's witchcraft. And we see these innovations that have come through, and people just see it differently. I mean, I don't understand social media as well as my classmates.
Yeah. That reminds me of in the first week. Did you get to see the Thomas Alva Edison video on Blackboard? If you go, let me see if I can find it. So if you go to week 1, share my screen. Week 1, and then you have this new innovation in the 17th century. Can you see?
Can't hear but can see.
Hallmark. Okay, so this is the one I'm talking about. Thomas Edison's terrifying innovations done by Studio C. If you're not seeing it, then we can see it right now. And then we can take a break. Should we? Okay.
Welcome to the 1893 World's Fair. Our first presentation is from the Wizard of Menlo Park, Mr. Thomas Edison, who will be demonstrating some new inventions.
Thank you. Now, for my first invention, I present for you all the phonograph. Took thousands of hours for me to perfect a scientific marvel that can record the sound of someone's voice.
It's magical. It can change the entire world as we know it.
Yes, that is the phonograph.
No. That marvelous slinking spring apparatus.
What that? It's just a spare coil I had in my bag.
Its weight seems to slink from hand to hand. What do you call it?
It's not anything. I don't call it anything.
I would call it a slinky. I bet it can even go downstairs.
Focus, please, please. Sir, may I have you speak here, and your voice will be recorded.
Is it quite safe?
You have nothing to fear.
Hello, my name is Reginald, and I am speaking to you now.
Now, to reproduce the tonal frequency of this man's voice.
Hello, my name is Reginald, and I am speaking to you now. There's no slinky, sir.
Show you my next invention.
Okay.
This is the light bulb. Using electricity, I can create a light brighter than any candle. Now, who of you would like to be illuminated?
Oh, please show us, Mr. Edison.
Dim the gas lamps, please.
Margaret, you look absolutely heinous in this light.
I'm not really a wizard, it's just an expression. It's science.
I don't know what that means, so I hate to hear it.
Give us more slinkies.
Slinky's not a thing.
Yes, it is a thing. It's a spring, a marvelous thing. Slinky, 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 slinky.
Everybody calm down. Sit down. This next one is my greatest invention yet. It is very entertaining. Really, lady? I haven't done anything yet.
I'm sorry, I spoke too soon.
I give you motion pictures. I place images on celluloid, and when I put them in sequence, it creates the illusion of movement. Observe.
Oh, this way to safety.
Sally Mae, we're on the 3rd floor. What's wrong with you people?
Mr. Anderson, get out!
Fine, I'll leave. You people clearly can't understand my genius.
Wait. What's that you have there?
What? Well, that, it's just a child's toy I made. A birthday gift for my nephew.
What does it do? Please don't tell me that the train comes out of it.
No, there's no train. I'll show you.
It's beautiful.
This.
Well, this is what I was talking about. New ideas, especially with science. Back then in the 17th and 18th century, these things were happening and people were just getting scared of new ideas. You know, even now, I think we have an aversion to new ideas and new technology. You know, like that thing has not gone away. And this is very much related to diffusion, how ideas diffuse. It takes time. So ChatGPT is the latest thing that happened, but people are just like, oh, whoa. We don't want to use it because it's going to be artificial AI, artificial intelligence, for example, in today's world. I think what Thomas Alva Edison was trying to do, his ideas were not accepted quickly, isn't it? Even the electricity and all kinds of other stuff that he invented. It took a while. And the same pattern continued. So that makes sense. The aspect of innovation. Yes, Steve.
I don't know why this thought just hit me. If Thomas Edison was a female, do you think he'd have been burned at the stake?
Good question. I am from a completely different culture, and not from that time era, so I don't know. But more than likely, I think he would have been. That's my impression. What do others think? It was a different era, man. I'm completely telling you, it was completely different time period. It's crazy. Don't you think we are so lucky to be born in this world, this time frame? I mean, even though we feel that this is getting crazy and crazy, but I think that back then it was more crazy.
It's still screwed up.
I guess, but it's so. Given a choice, would you prefer to be born now, or would you prefer to be born that time, Steve? What is
There
the
was something I read today or I saw today, it came across me one way or the other, that anybody that's living in a first world society today, no matter where you are in the social structure, you're still better off than the king and queens of the past. So how do you go off and make your changes or differentiate? The only thing I know that's been constant in my life has been change.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, man. Steve, I think, we do romanticize the past and we feel that, okay, that was a better world, but I'm not sure. I mean, it was good in some ways, but I guess now it's better. What do you think, Haley?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would not like to be burned at the stake. So I'm comfortable where I'm at.
Thankful.
Yes.
Thankful and comfortable. Even though it's crazy, but still I think if you have to choose between the two, I think people will do that. Do you agree to that, Sarah?
Yeah, I wouldn't have made it. For sure. I don't think I would have fared well as like
Well, that gives you a perspective about diffusion of the ideas. It takes time, it is complex, even though it's a good idea, it doesn't mean that it's going to spread on its own. People are going to embrace it right then. And that's the beauty of diffusion. I think every idea is filtered and every idea is resisted before it becomes a majority diffused idea in that sense. So we're going to go through all of that and uncover what Ev Rogers did to make that process transparent. The diffusion was always going on. I mean, ever since history of mankind, but there was a process that happens which Ev Rogers taught us. So let's take a break. I think it's 7:13. So let's take a break, about 15-minute break, and come back at 7:30. And then throughout the semester, we're going to learn all these things, But I just wanted to give you like a background of the context that we are coming from. So see you in 15 minutes.